Come, Nerevar, come gaze upon a DLC of Dark Souls and other Souls-like games. It is a game series I'm not even in. Well, Nerevar, this one's for you. We'll be rating the Dark Souls DLCs in chronological order. First up, we have Artorias of the Abyss DLC for the first Dark Souls game. Darkness, Abyss, yes, all good things. 10/10, but really this DLC introduces iconic characters that influence the rest of the series. It has an NPC tease for future installments such as Bloodborne. The DLC starts with the Sanctuary Guardian fight, which is fast-paced and somewhat frustrating with its poison and lightning. But from there, the fights are some of the franchise's best. Between Kalameet the Black Dragon, Artorias himself, and Manus, Father of the Abyss, with various complex areas to lead into each fight, this is a near-perfect addition to the main game. Additionally, you get to fight Manus with a pup version of Esif the Great Grey Wolf, 9/10, 11/10 when you play with the pup. Moving on. Nothing quite like a bit of controversy in a rating list, and there's no better place for it than Dark Souls 2. What a grand and intoxicating innocence. Ultimately, the DLC in Dark Souls 2 makes the rest of the game actually somewhat worthwhile. The first release was Crown of the Sunken King, providing the most layered and intricate map design this game has to offer. Needing to use a bow to shoot targets and move platforms up and down felt like something out of Zelda, rather than a Souls game. Now this area is still full of its fair share of frustrations that Dark Souls 2 is known for. Falling off cliffs unexpectedly, random ganks from a boss you don't face until later on, and platforming required with no jump button to speak of. That said, Sin is one of the best dragon fights of the series to this point, and certainly the best one Dark Souls 2 puts out. 6/10. Dark Souls 2 took the same approach in DLCs as they did with the amount of bosses, in that if you make enough of them, surely one will be good. This is that one. The chain-crossing design was so good, they decided to repeat it in Elden Ring. Descending down this Tower of Madness is harrowing and daunting, but it's nothing short of fun. This DLC received the cream of the crop in boss designs, especially for Dark Souls 2 standards. Suralone, Fume Knight, Blue Smelter Demon. These bosses are known throughout all of Souls fandom, and for good reason. Many people complain about the run-up to some of these bosses. However, if you kill the enemies enough times, they stop spawning, so I've never found it much of an issue with my destructive wrath. 8/10. In all honesty, most of this DLC does not honor the Sixth House and the Tribe Unmourned. The castle is gorgeous, but heavy winds and snow effects don't let you see half of it. Enemies here hit incredibly hard for what feels like no reason. The first boss you face is invisible and not even that much fun. I would continue to trash this DLC if it wasn't for the incredible finale it puts up with the burnt Ivory King fight. Running around and releasing knights to aid you in the final battle really feels like you're gearing up for some Lord of the Rings level combat. However, that amazing final triumphant battle comes at the cost of the frozen reindeer fields. So it kind of balances out. 4/10. With Miyazaki back at the helm of the design team, Bloodborne claims the quality the studio garnered in its Dark Souls days. This is one of the best games on the market and likely always will be. Gothic, Victorian, creepy, eldritch nightmares really speak to my blackened soul on a personal level. The one area Bloodborne struggles with compared to others is weapon variety, and this DLC fixes that by adding a slew of new weapons radically different from anything found in the original game. You have an arm-strapped Gatling gun, a pizza cutter for pizzas the size of your favorite comic abomination. Oh yeah, and the Moonlight Greatsword finally makes its appearance. But much like Artorias of the Abyss DLC, the Old Hunters DLC makes its name known with its poster child fight in that of Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower. After spending the whole game communing with the doll for level-ups, you fight the hunter she's modeled after, and she's a badass. But before that, Ludwig springs to his heels for an ambush fight like none other here to remind you that this DLC holds no punches. There is a notable difficulty spike into this DLC from the main game, and personally I love that. Leave the end game for those who truly push through and deserve it. The Orphan of Kos is one of the hardest fights the franchise has to offer in a scene so cinematic it's truly fitting for a game the caliber of Bloodborne. Were it not for the Living Failures fight not being really up to snuff with the rest of the DLC, This would likely receive a perfect 10-10 score. However, they do exist, and they do suck, so my hand is forced. 9, 5, 10. There's something to be said about all the snow levels in Dark Souls DLCs having amazing final boss fights, but terrible levels. But I won't be the one to say it. This has a few treasured moments in it and very cool weapons, but unfortunately the DLC in totality only really offers about 2 or 3 hours of content, and 2 bosses only, which makes it the shortest of the franchise. However, this does offer the series' only 3-phase boss fight, and that's gotta count for something. 6/10. We finished the Dark Souls DLC rating with the closeout to the Dark Souls story. The callbacks to the previous games are present. The music is stunning. The new items are the most desirable in the game. The areas are so well thought out and tough as nails. The NPCs are interesting and complex. There's really not much to complain about when it comes to this one. It even provides a permanent purging stone, a useful tool to rid yourself of curses. The DLC immediately introduces angels, powerful creatures that work like no other enemy before them, making them terrifying out of the gate. This area even has the skimpy fire swamp witches that were oh so popular in certain parts of the internet, making a grand and pyrotastic return. Following that, you have the Ornstein and Smoo fight. If Ornstein and Smoo were giant screaming bat demons that shot Kamehameha blasts out of their mouth. But after the demon princes are felled, you finally arrive at the Ringed City, the final location of Gwyn's last child. Every inch of the Ringed City holds bits of lore implications and nods to events that led up to the point of where you stand today. It's grotesquely grandiose. Meteor has claimed playthrough after playthrough of rage quitters with his secret boss fight. Many controllers and TVs smashed by the chosen undead, unable to conquer the Void Dragon. Or you just cheese him with silvery mist, your call there. The DLC finishes up with a boss fight that lives rent-free in my head to this day. Slave Knight Gale is the most appropriate final boss there could be. A clashing of fate as you try to endure the absolute onslaught of attacks. Halfway through the fight, he regains his composure and fights as the knight you expect him to be. All for the sake of his lady. Eventually, it is your fate that conquers, and with bittersweet sentiment you close out the Dark Souls saga forever. 10-10, no question.